Hey, what's up guys? First off, sorry for the dip in content lately. I have been a little bit under the weather over the past week, although I am largely recovered now even if I sound a little bit weird, but yeah, that's doubly frustrating for me because typically I will build out a buffer of a few weeks to kind of make sure content continues to roll here on the channel and account for situations like this, but unfortunately I got sick right in the middle of me rebuilding that margin, so, what are you gonna do? But for now, you can expect more standard polished releases to happen on Wednesdays, and most Saturdays I will be, still continuing to publish more off-the-cuff kind of organic style videos in the form of impressions and whatnot. And with that brief bit of house cleaning out of the way, let's go ahead and return to some more familiar fare here on the channel, as the shine of the Switch 2 has kinda started to wear off a little bit for me, and the silver lining of being sick is that I got to spend a ton of time getting back to the basics, which would be picking up new Steam games, testing them out on the deck, and obviously sharing them here with you. And I will say most of the games on this list are a little bit spooky since we are just about a week out from October at this point, and when this video goes live I will already be knee-deep in the fog of Silent Hill F. But let's kick this off with the Silent Hill series' nearest AAA competitor, Resident Evil, because first up we've got Resident Evil Village. Now, like I've mentioned a dozen times before, Resident Evil is one of those series that I will just rebuy endlessly. And a lot of that's nostalgia, right? Resident Evil, by the reasoning of my somewhat advanced years, is as iconic as Mario to me personally, is a series that I can definitely say I've played for decades at this point. And because it's a series that's so dear to me, I rarely bat an eye at picking up extra copies across platforms. Although typically I'll wait until it hits a sale, and in this case I got a good deal from CD Keys, or, well, sorry, it's loaded at this point, but that video is still on the way. For now, just know that I got it for like $8 and was thrilled to give it a shot on the Steam Deck to test it out. So far I have not played Resident Evil 7 or Village on the Steam Deck, only Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake, so I was pretty curious to see how it would feel in light of those prior experiences. Thankfully, after firing it up this past week, I can report it runs pretty solid on the Steam Deck, but before we get into a deeper dive on its handheld performance, first let's do a little bit of background here for anybody who's new to Resident Evil Village. This is the second of the modern titles to shift into a first-person perspective, and it has you stepping into the shoes of Ethan Winters looking for your missing daughter. It's more action-oriented than Resident Evil 7, and I have to say, in a few ways, I kinda like this game more than 7. Kinda the same way that even though I know that Resident Evil 2 Remake is a better game than Resident Evil 3 Remake, I still like the breezier, action-focused experience that game offers. But anyways, after an absolutely harrowing intro and finally finding your way into the village in Resident Evil Village, the game pops off proper and is just a joy to play from a design perspective. Objectives are easy to track, there's plenty to explore off the beaten path despite being a largely linear game, and of course it has that brilliantly Tetris-fied inventory management. All of this and it still manages to pack in the scares despite your being pretty adept at combat as an everyman turned slightly more badass. But how does it actually play on the Steam Deck? Well, at first I was a little worried because the opening video had that kind of test signal problem that I've seen on a lot of games before, but thankfully after a quick update to Village that went away and the FMV video started playing just fine. On the performance front, I was kinda blown away to see it hitting a pretty consistent 60 FPS at the default settings and 720p resolution, but I probably shouldn't have been that surprised given that prior RE Engine Resident Evils also ran pretty great on the deck. Occasionally I'd see dips into the mid to high 50s in exterior environments, but with interior environments with less particle effects it seemed to be a lot more solid, perhaps unsurprisingly. Also, I have to say, Capcom is excellent, not just at giving you options to adjust graphics performance, but giving you a clear readout on what each of these does, and the hit-to-video memory utilization. I seriously wish every game did this just so it would be easier to sort out what exactly you're sacrificing in the name of frame rate stability. I didn't notice any Steam Deck specific preset, but with its default settings I found the experience to be perfectly Goldilocks in balancing performance to visuals. On top of that I had no control issues to speak of, and yeah, this is just an all-around great experience on the deck out of the box, save for that update that I almost wasn't patient enough to wait for. So whether you're hopping back in for another go or playing it for the first time, Resident Evil Village is a great entry on the Resident Evil mythos, provided you don't mind its larger bent into action territory. Next up is not technically a pickup, but rather a game that was graciously provided to me by the developers and publisher, and that would be the Moros Protocol. And I'd highlighted this in the Games Coming in September video last month, where I mentioned that I would reach out to the developers and see if they would kick me a key for it, and they were kind enough to do exactly that, so big thanks to Pixel Rain and Super Rare Originals for providing it. Now this was a retro-inspired FPS roguelike, not light, meaning that as you make progress through its stages you will retain some run-to-run currency that will let you upgrade your abilities and resources to make each subsequent run more manageable. The premise is that you play as a continually respawning hero with no memory or allies aboard a derelict warship called the Orpheus, which itself is just covered with a range of alien and otherworldly horrors. within which you'll blast and slice your way through procedurally generated levels, secure upgrades, all the while trying to survive for just one more run. And I called this a boomer shooter at first, which isn't unfair, I don't think, as a throwback to 90s and early 2000s first-person shooter games, but I have to say I really love the visuals here with that crunchy pixelized aesthetic. Although as much as I love the visuals, there's a fair amount of jank here that definitely detracted from the experience for me. For starters, it did suffer from that weird quirk in docked mode where I had to swap the Steam Deck and external controller positions before I could take control, which isn't that bad, but it did leave me a little confused at first. Beyond that, there's also some interface weirdness where occasionally if I was hitting start to go into my loadout and review my upgrades, once or twice it somehow took me to the true pause menu where you'd adjust your settings. But by and large, the experience itself was fairly smooth. Curiously, it did not maintain a solid 60, and occasionally I would see dips as low as the 40s here and there, so I wouldn't call it unplayable or anything, but you'll definitely notice some stutters, and unfortunately there really aren't a lot of graphics options to adjust in this game. But all that being said, the moment-to-moment action is fairly enjoyable. Your character is pretty nimble as long as you're keeping an eye on your stamina, and while you'll definitely need to die a few times before you can bump up your health and stamina just to be a little more lethal, once it hits its stride, it's pretty thrilling to rush into each new area and contend with a range of different monsters, all while desperately looking for health refills or the next teleporter so you can push deeper into the Orpheus. There's definitely a learning curve to figuring out how to balance when to go melee versus ranged, or how to manage your stamina effectively in the early game, but if you've played similar roguelikes before, you're likely to find some enjoyment here. Again, this isn't my favorite genre, but what they've done here is commendable, even if it does feel like it needs to bake just a little bit longer to clean up some of those interface and performance issues. But next up is a game that I randomly stumbled upon thanks to Wario from Twitter, and this instantly grabbed my attention with its low poly aesthetic, and that would be Easy Delivery Company. Easy Delivery Co. is a cutesy, unholy union of Silent Hill, Animal Crossing, and Lake. You'll be delivering packages for the Easy Delivery Company in a snowy landscape filled with not only interesting characters, but also intriguing and, I suspect, unsettling mysteries. It's littered with cutesy beep speak, and your primary duties will be to pick up orders, deliver packages for jobs, and in turn use your earnings to buy more helpful gear. At first I picked up a shovel to clear the road to make deliveries further out, but then also you'll have to keep yourself stocked up with energy drinks, lest you become sluggish in making your drop-offs. Another curious mechanic is that if you stay out of shelter for too long in the bitter cold, you will temporarily black out it seems, and when that happens, you end up here in a strange place I definitely don't fully understand yet, but suffice it to say, I'm intrigued. I don't know that I classify this as a horror game necessarily, but there's definitely a pervasive eeriness about it that's really hitting all the right notes for me. The combination of low visibility, floaty driving mechanics, and that low poly PS1 presentation is just sublime. And while a lot of it feels spooky as you cruise through the snow in your delivery truck to further and further delivery destinations, some of the music sounds like it wouldn't be out of place in a 5th gen snowboarding game like 1080 or SSX. It's a curiously nostalgic mix of isolated vibes and mystery that I just can't wait to spend more time with. And while it runs great on the Steam Deck, the controls did feel a little bit weird at first, although that might be because most of the footage that you're seeing here is from the demo, which I tested before I bought the full game, and in the demo there were less tooltips explaining which buttons performed which functions, and it also seems like they swapped the primary action button from the right face button to the bottom face button in the full release, if we're being controller agnostic. Speaking of, if you do play the demo, you might only want to play a little bit of it to get a feel for the game, because even though I'd read the demo progress carries over, when I bought the full game it didn't seem to detect my save, which was kind of a bummer. Although I didn't mind too much because this does seem like the sort of game you could just chill with without necessarily beelining the credits or anything like that. Ultimately, if you're somebody who has a fondness for the PS1 or N64 era and you're looking for something cozy with at least some creepiness thrown in for good measure, it's at least worth checking out the Easy Delivery Co. demo. But now let's move on to one of the highest profile releases for the month that I will definitely not be finishing anytime soon, Hollow Knight Silksong. And I don't mean I won't finish this soon because it's a bad game, it's an incredible game, and I have no doubt that's exactly what Team Cherry would deliver in due time. Rather, I won't finish this because it's a follow-up to the original Hollow Knight, and until I finish that, I'm definitely not going to charge ahead and fully explore this one, even though I really want to do just that because, as you might expect, it's absolutely stellar. Originally planned as an expansion to Hollow Knight, Team Cherry announced way back in 2019 that this would indeed end up becoming a full standalone sequel. Taking place in Farloom, Silksong is also a Metroidvania with Soulsian difficulty that is filled to the brim with challenging foes and boss encounters. And right off the bat, I will say that even though I haven't beaten the original, I can already tell I like this one just a little bit better. Mostly because it's a little bit more lush visually, but also it's just so refreshing to see this kind of top-tier design priced at $19.99 no less. And I won't spoil much of the narrative here because I do think it's best to go into these games blind if you can. But I will say the entire first section is just brilliant in how it organically lays out the rules and workings of its world. It starts with an injury to introduce you to the bind mechanic for self-healing after you've accumulated energy from fallen foes. It then loops you through a very Super Mario Bros. 1-1 sort of level, where you instantly get a feel for jumping, grabbing ledges, learning you can swim and that items from fallen enemies will float in the water beneath you, combat, a hidden secret area, and finally a branching path where you can either charge forward into the light to progress, or make the decision to fall into the pit. And if you do go the pit route, you will find that you've closed the loop right back where you started. And that's totally brilliant, not just for the dopamine hit of getting your bearings, but also because it subtly communicates to you that you can probably expect this sort of navigational intentionality throughout. Oh, and you'll also learn that enemies you've already defeated will respawn if you venture far enough and then return. That's the sort of thoughtful attention to detail that absolutely tickles my brain, and even after that brief intro sequence, I already knew I was playing something special. Performance on the Steam Deck is rock solid at 60 FPS, and controlling Hornet 2 is just an absolute joy. Buttery smooth where every leap, attack, and near miss is incredibly satisfying. The only weird thing that I found was in the menu it lists left bumper and right bumper at the top to cycle between different sections, but for some reason this didn't work for me. I'm not sure if it's an oversight or maybe a bug that's only affecting dock mode on the deck or something like that, but I could still use the analog stick to navigate left and right through the different screens, so hardly a deal breaker, but if it is a bug, I expect it will get squashed pretty quickly considering this game peaked at nearly 600,000 concurrent players. So yeah, all of the extra time that Team Cherry took to make sure this game would be a top-notch experience has definitely paid off. Which honestly is kind of bittersweet for me personally because I know I shouldn't press on until I've beaten the original. And I'm not sure if the original is strictly speaking necessary to enjoy this game or if it just enriches it, because clearly I'm missing some context here, but something tells me that even in isolation you could probably just jump right in and have a great time with this. I know I certainly did, and it's probably telling that I was willing to grab this game at launch and support Team Cherry's efforts despite knowing my fully enjoying this game is probably months or maybe even years away. But now let's round this list out with an undeniably spooky experience that I've been curious about ever since I pointed it out sometime last year, and that would be the Singaporean horror game Scarred. And I have to say right out of the gate that I definitely do not recommend this game on Steam Deck. Even dropping to the lowest visual preset, I was seeing performance mostly in the 20s or even down into the teens or single digits intermittently. Also, the controls are more optimized for mouse and keyboard than controller, which, given the deck's flexibility and configurable control schemes, isn't the end of the world, but if you're expecting a frictionless console-like experience for this one out of the box, you're not going to find it here. And to top it all off, after I was just getting into it, the game crashed on me right after the first puzzle. I went to reload the game and had the option to continue, but sadly it would not let me, so I just had to start over again, so yeah, not a great start. But that's just part of the Steam Deck's charm, is rolling the dice on games that aren't necessarily optimized for the deck just to see what will happen. But even though I'm being a little bit of a negative Nancy here, I do want to give this game some props for what it's setting out to do, even if it's an experience that would be much better enjoyed on a desktop rig. For starters, it's a horror puzzle game and not an adventure game necessarily. And even without any combat to speak of, at least initially, I came away pretty impressed with what it was doing. I've never played a Singaporean horror game before that I can remember, and while there's definitely some ghostly parallels with what I played in Japanese horror games, it's got its own flavor that I appreciate. Wandering the halls of a spooky school within a nightmare isn't exactly new territory for me, but I really like how straightforward it was in just getting under your skin by taking a familiar setting and making it very unsettling without having to invoke a Silent Hill style otherworld to pull it off. Granted, some of its narrative beats are a little bit too on the nose, but it's unsettling nonetheless, particularly considering it pitches itself as being based on true events. Thematically, it seems to share a lot of DNA with Silent Hill: The Short Message, which, while not the best Silent Hill game, I really enjoyed it and think it probably gets more hate than it deserves. Playing as Calvin in the beginning, a high school kid suffering from the pressures of being an overachiever, at first seems like pretty standard stuff, until one particular moment where the game mixes it up a little by revealing Calvin is, admittedly, kind of a dick. Sadly, the game crashed before I could get to the point of seeing whether he was bound for some deserved retribution or would have some sort of redemption arc during his portion of the game. But still, even with the brief few minutes I was able to play, I was definitely intrigued and will have to give it another shot on my gaming rig at some point. So yeah, even though I categorically can't recommend this for the Steam Deck, I'm still looking forward to giving it another shot later on, once it's proven to be a little bit more stable, either through a patch or seeing if I encounter any of the crashing behavior on a desktop setup. And that's going to be it for this one, but hey, what about you? Are there any recent Steam Deck pickups that you would like to share in the comments below? If so, I would love to hear about it. As for upcoming videos here on the channel, again, look for Wednesday releases at the very least as I start ramping production back up, and we'll certainly be looking at some Silent Hill F impressions next week since I'm definitely going to cave and buy the digital deluxe so I can play it a few days early. Beyond that, we'll be leaning even harder into spooky stuff and definitely more Steam Deck content in October. But for now, as always, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch videos here on the channel. Have an amazing rest of your day or evening, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.